Welcome to Process Safety Cards, a good deal safer. Process safety cards are a simple way to get knowledge into the hands of those who need it most. Process safety knowledge is readily available, we just need to share and use it. It's disappointing that, in the 21st year of the 21st century, we are still suffering major accidents, despite bigger data and better technology. Perhaps we're focusing our efforts on the wrong organizational and technical barriers, the protection measures that prevent or mitigate loss of control or containment. There is a wealth of process safety initiatives and frameworks, for example CCPS and the Energy Institute, but changes in culture typically come from the top down, and it may take time to get additional or enhanced knowledge to those who need it most. It's true that gaming and e-learning are becoming more common, but they can be expensive to develop and deploy, and they may not include all stakeholders, for example contractors or third parties. Process safety cards are a simple, inclusive approach to sharing information and experience. They are accessible, memorable, and adaptable. In simple terms, the message is know your enemy, and for the process industry, the enemy is typically loss of control or containment of hazardous materials or energy. The cards aim to increase awareness via these simple principles, to help frontline personnel remember that these types of events can occur. To help them recognize the causes or threats that lead to those events. To respect the controls or barriers put in place to address those events. And to report any concerns about the presence or performance of the barriers. Thereafter, there's an obligation or expectation on the duty holder or owner-operator to respond to frontline feedback and ultimately to recover the protection back to its original effectiveness. Process safety cards represent 52 typical loss of containment scenarios or events. These are split into 4 separate suits or types. Degradation. Failure within the design envelope or under strength. Discharge. Open route to atmosphere. Damage. External impact. And deviation. Failure beyond the design envelope or overstress. You'll notice that these have a familiar playing card format, which makes it easier to introduce and adopt. The cards provide an introduction, however the real wisdom comes from properly understanding the scenarios. As Gordon MacDonald from the HSE said, on the steps of the court outside the inquiry into Buncefield, do you understand what can go wrong? Do you know what your systems are to prevent this from happening? Do you have information to assure you that they are working effectively? Process safety cards and their associated scenarios aim to address these first 2 questions. For each card, there is a separate page with a loss of containment event in bowtie format, which includes typical causes, controls, their vulnerabilities and effectiveness, and most importantly, barrier degradation factors, the issues or elements that create or enlarge holes in the Swiss cheese model. The goal is to physically and digitally post or share these scenarios in prominent locations such as control rooms, workshops, meeting rooms or desktops. Anywhere that people can be informed and reminded about the unplanned events that may involve or impact them. Here we see a typical scenario of overfilling. We have a threat type on the left-hand side of the top event, or not of the bow tie. The consequences on the right-hand side of the top event will depend on the nature and scale of the materials and activity. These may include safety, environmental, or asset impacts. Between each threat and the top event before control or containment is lost, are appropriate controls or barriers which are categorized by type and vulnerability. The barrier degradation factors are presented in yellow to highlight the challenges to effectiveness or deterioration in performance. These are the key message to get across. Barriers are not just fit and forget, they must be monitored and managed throughout their lifetime. It's also possible to illustrate relative risks for each scenario using threat likelihood and release scale categorization. Obviously these are only indicative, but can help those who have no appreciation of the frequency and size of each event to better understand the criticality of the barriers on that scenario. How might the cards be used in real life? For frontline personnel, placing a pack of cards in any workplace means they can be picked up and played like any other card game. The lazy way is just passive learning by repeated handling. More structured deployment may include toolbox talks, for example, explain your experience or knowledge of the card that you've been dealt. Or quizzes, for example, deal out the cards without titles and ask personnel to name the event based only on the image. Or cards can be used for frontline feedback, such as surveys or ballots with familiar images to help frame the question. Or hazard reminders, for example, attach relevant cards to work permits. Cards could be attached to vulnerable locations during plant inspections or visits to highlight actual or potential areas of concern. And cards can also be used to supplement site inductions. For example, visitors are given cards to carry with them as a reminder of what can go wrong and what they must be aware of when on site. Here we have an example of an online quiz or survey. Using the familiar cards, you can enhance or illustrate questions which are either for an informal quiz to capture awareness or a formal survey to gauge understanding and perception. With familiar Microsoft platforms, you can quickly gather this invaluable information to determine the effectiveness of your initiatives. It's not only important that frontline personnel, i.e. those who may contribute to and or be impacted by a loss of containment, are using the cards. Senior management or leaders, who are perhaps less technically proficient, can also benefit from the cards in a variety of ways. For example, at the start of meetings, having safety moments where each person talks about their role and responsibilities related to the card that they've been dealt. Or for HACCP or PHA validation, for example, at the start of the study, the cards are dealt out, and as each deviation or event is discussed, each participant puts relevant cards they hold into a central stack. At the end of the study, the cards that are left are either not applicable or need further discussion. Cards can be used for dashboards or related to company or industry incidents. The value of each card could be used as a relative ranking of potential hazards. And campaigns can be deployed where each week there is a focus on a specific card. With 52 weeks in a year and 52 cards in a deck, this fits neatly into the calendar. Given the present situation with lockdown, isolation, and remote working, we appreciate that it is challenging to actually get the cards into the hands of those who may benefit from them. We have developed ways to digitally play or interact with cards using online card tables. On the left-hand side, we have separate stacks where players can place a card based on their perception or evidence that the event is either not applicable, managed, not managed, or it's unknown if or how it is managed. This can be used for a quick dip check or survey. On the right-hand side is HACCP or PHA validation, where study participants can put their cards onto the appropriate stack as the study progresses. A recent innovation is using individual QR codes on each card, which can be used to direct the player or user from their phone or other device to a dedicated public or internal site so that knowledge about each card, in this case internal corrosion, is immediately accessible and usable. Here we have some incidents from the CSB investigations plus their associated videos. There are bulletins from the CCPS or EPSC, media such as podcasts, and links to relevant organizations, standards and guidance. Simply branding or tagging these cards gives direct access to contextual process safety intelligence. There are a variety of different applications for safety at work cards. These include process safety management, stewardship or fundamentals, human and organizational factors, ignition sources, occupational safety, chemical safety. For example, Handy material safety data sheets for each chemical. Road transportation hazards. Then industry-specific applications such as mining, drilling, and wind power. Cards can be produced in a variety of international languages to engage local communities. Cards have been provided to operations personnel in a variety of jurisdictions and industries, including oil and gas, petrochemicals, mining, life sciences, chemicals and water. However, current COVID restrictions have limited the opportunities for substantial knowledge exchange. Initial feedback from prototype sites has been positive, and it is hoped that measurable results, based on significant reductions in unplanned events, will be forthcoming, as wider adoption encourages and facilitates conversations about complex and critical issues in an intuitive and engaging way. Although the cards are built on gaming and micro-learning, they are not just a game. They offer a simple, cost-effective means to exchange knowledge and experience between management and operations personnel, so that everyone from the boardroom to the control room has the same basic level of understanding about the hazards and controls associated with their assets and activities. The cards are not intended to replace existing process safety or asset integrity strategies. They complement and supplement your existing programs using the same industry frameworks you recognize and respect. In summary, cards increase awareness. Bow ties increase understanding. From that understanding, personnel are more vigilant in identifying degraded or defeated barriers, and ultimately, ensuring the presence and sustaining the performance of barriers can help achieve robust process integrity. Thank you for watching. All questions are welcome. You can find out more on our website or via the email and LinkedIn addresses on the screen.